It was one of those evenings when the city looked like it had forgotten how to breathe. The rain fell in a steady rhythm, whispering against empty sidewalks, and my half-broken umbrella struggled to hold itself together against the wind. I was walking home from work, my shoes soaking through, my thoughts wandering somewhere between exhaustion and quiet loneliness. At 27. I had everything I once thought I wanted: a small apartment, a stable design job, a few polite friends who sent birthday texts out of habit, yet it all felt mechanical. Every day looked like a looped scene I couldn't escape from. People passed by, cars splashed water over the curb, and the world kept moving while I stayed still inside. That's when I noticed it. A small black wallet lying near the entrance of a cafe I'd never been to. The place was closing for the night, lights dim, chairs stacked inside. I hesitated for a moment, then bent down to pick it up. It was surprisingly elegant, soft leather, simple stitching, faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine. I looked around, half expecting someone to rush back searching for it, but the street was silent. Under the yellow glow of a streetlight, I opened it carefully. There were a few credit cards, a folded receipt, and a photograph. A woman smiling beside a golden retriever, sunlight caught in her hair. Something about her expression made me stop. It wasn't just beauty. It was the kind of smile that hid something unspoken, like laughter that came after a long cry. Then I saw the business card tucked behind the photo. Evelyn, art director, Bloom Studio. Her name lingered in my mind longer than I expected. Evelyn. Even the sound of it felt warm, like a melody I'd heard before. I told myself it was just a wallet, that I'd return it tomorrow and forget about it. But as I walked home through the drizzle, I caught myself wondering about her, who she was, what kind of art she made. Whether she smiled like that when no one was watching. That night, I placed the wallet on my bedside table. My apartment felt colder than usual. I turned off the lights, but sleep refused to come. Every time I closed my eyes, her face appeared. Soft hair, kind eyes, and that peaceful, almost lonely smile. It felt strange how someone I'd never met could pull at my thoughts like that. At 2 a.m. I got up and poured myself a glass of water. The city outside was still dripping with rain. I sat by the window, holding the wallet again, tracing the embossed initials with my thumb. Evelyn, I whispered softly, as if the name itself carried a story I was about to step into. By morning, I had made up my mind. I'd return it in person. The next day, the sky was clearer, but the air still smelled like yesterday's rain. I took a bus to Bloom Studio, a modern building with glass walls and climbing ivy along one side. Inside, the space was filled with light, color, and quiet focus. People moved gracefully between canvases, designs, and conversations I didn't understand. When I asked for Evelyn, the receptionist smiled and pointed toward a corner office with tall windows. My heart beat faster for no reason I could name. I knocked gently. A calm voice answered, "Come in." And there she was. She looked exactly like the photograph, maybe a little more real, a little more human. Her hair was tied back loosely, a few strands falling over her cheek. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, everything outside the room disappeared. I stammered slightly as I held out the wallet. "Hi, I found this near a cafe last night. I think it's yours." Her lips curved into a surprised smile, the kind that lights up quietly, not to impress, but to think. "You found it?" I thought it was gone forever. I must have dropped it when I got into the cab. She took it from my hand, her fingers brushing against mine. Just a second, but enough to send a strange warmth through me. "Thank you," she said softly. "You didn't have to bring it all the way here?" I shrugged, trying to hide how nervous I suddenly felt. It didn't seem right to just leave it. "You had your cards and everything in there?" Her eyes softened, and for a moment she studied me the way artists probably study their canvas, quietly, thoughtfully, as if trying to see what isn't said. Still, she said, I appreciate it. Not everyone would go through the trouble. There was a pause, long enough to feel the air shift between us. She reached into her drawer, probably looking for something, maybe to repay me, but I quickly shook my head. Please don't. I didn't do it for that. Her expression changed, like she wasn't used to kindness without a reason. She nodded slowly. Then at least let me say thank you properly. Maybe coffee sometime. I smiled politely, half to mask the sudden flutter inside my chest. Maybe, I said, if our paths cross again. I turned to leave before she could see the faint blush rising on my face. But as I stepped out of the studio and into the hallway, I felt the pull again, that quiet, magnetic something I couldn't explain. I glanced back once. Through the tall window, Ava was standing by her desk, the morning light falling over her shoulders like a soft halo. She was looking right at me, and for a second, neither of us looked away. I smiled faintly and walked out into the brightness of the day, pretending my heart wasn't already skipping faster than it should. That evening, when I got home, my apartment felt a little less empty. I poured myself tea, sat by the window, and watched the sunset fade into a wash of orange and gray. Maybe it was just coincidence. Maybe it meant nothing. But a part of me already knew something had shifted. Something small, quiet, but unstoppable. I had gone out to return a lost wallet. And without realizing it, I'd already started losing my heart. A week slipped by quietly after that morning at Bloom's studio. Life went back to its usual rhythm. The hum of my computer, the sound of rain against glass, the taste of coffee that had gone cold before I remembered to drink it. But even in that ordinary silence, my mind kept returning to her. Ava Lynn, the way she had said thank you, soft and genuine, like she meant it in more ways than one. Then one evening, as I was sorting through sketches on my desk, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Hi. Is this Elina? The voice on the other end was calm, low, instantly recognizable. My heart tripped over itself. Yes, Ava. She let out a small laugh, the kind that hides a smile behind it. I hope I'm not intruding. I found your number on a note inside the wallet. I think you left it accidentally. I froze, realizing she was right. I'd scribbled my number on a torn piece of paper weeks ago for a client and must have tucked it in the side pocket. Oh, I said, trying to sound casual. That must have been by mistake. Well, she replied, voice light but deliberate. Then maybe it wasn't. Maybe it's fate's mistake. There was a pause, just long enough to let the words sink in. Then she added, I wanted to thank you properly. Coffee, maybe? No obligations, I promise. I hesitated for a heartbeat too long, then said softly, all right. Coffee sounds nice. The cafe we met at was small and sunlit, filled with the smell of roasted beans and faint jazz. I arrived a few minutes early, nervous for reasons I couldn't admit to myself. Then she walked in, hair down this time, a loose cream sweater, a quiet confidence that seemed effortless. People turned to look at her, but she only looked at me. Sorry I'm late, she said, setting her umbrella aside. Traffic was chaos. It's fine, I smiled. I'm just glad you came. Our conversation began with safe topics, work, the weather, design trends, the kind of talk that keeps emotions in check. But soon, it began to unravel naturally, like threads falling into place. She told me she was an art director, that she built her career from scratch, fighting through rejection and doubt. I told her about my freelance projects and how art sometimes felt like both my comfort and my prison. Art has this strange way of holding you hostage, Ava said, swirling her coffee absent-mindedly. You start creating to escape something, but eventually you're trapped by what you've created. I watched her as she spoke, the flicker of light on her face. the sadness in her eyes she tried to hide between smiles. "You sound like you've lived a lot," I said gently. She gave a short, tired laugh. "Maybe more than I wanted to." For a moment, she went quiet, then took a deep breath. "I was in a relationship for 3 years with someone who didn't believe in loyalty the way I did." I stayed silent, letting her continue. "She left me for someone else, a woman we both knew. The worst part is," she hesitated, eyes glimmering, "I kept loving her even after she stopped being kind to me. Something in me ached. I knew that kind of love, the one that hurt more the longer you held on to it. But I didn't say that." I just nodded, letting her see that I understood. She smiled faintly. "Sorry, that's too much for a first coffee, isn't it?" "Not at all," I said softly. "It's nice to talk to someone who doesn't pretend they're fine all the time." That made her laugh again. And it was softer this time, genuine, lighter. From that day on, things began to change in small, almost invisible ways. She started texting me short messages at first. "Hope your day's okay. I saw something today that reminded me of your sketches." Then came evening calls, weekend walks, and the kind of silence that didn't feel awkward anymore. Sometimes we sat on a park bench, watching the world pass by while we shared stories that didn't have endings. Other times she'd show me her favorite art galleries, quiet spaces filled with color and stillness, and just like that, our connection grew, not rushed, not loud, just quietly inevitable. One meeting became 2, then 3, and suddenly my empty evenings were filled with her voice. There was something healing about her presence. She had a way of making the world feel softer, of making loneliness seem like it wasn't something to escape from, but something to understand. One night, as we walked along the riverside, city lights shimmering on the water, she told me something that stayed with me. "I don't trust easily anymore," she said, hands tucked in her coat pockets. "When someone breaks you, it's not the trust you lose. It's the version of yourself that believed you were safe." I didn't know what to say, so I said the only thing that felt true. Maybe trust isn't about feeling safe. Maybe it's about choosing to stay open, even when you're scared. She looked at me, really looked, like my words had reached somewhere deep. "You sound like someone who's been broken too." I smiled faintly. Maybe. I didn't tell her about the girl I once loved, the one who made me believe in forever before walking away without a reason. That wound still lived inside me, quiet but raw dot, and yet standing there beside Ava. Hearing her voice carried by the wind, something in me began to heal, or maybe it just began to feel again, over time. I learned her habits, the way she hummed while waiting for her coffee, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about color and light, the way her silence said more than words ever could. She became a part of my days, without even trying, but in quiet moments when she smiled at me across the table, I caught myself wondering, could someone like her ever see someone like me as more than just a kind stranger who found her wallet? I tried to ignore the answer I already knew, because falling for her felt as natural as breathing, and just as uncontrollable. I didn't know then that the more I tried to return what wasn't mine, the more I'd lose what was left of me. It was raining again, the kind of rain that makes the whole city sound like it's whispering secrets. I was sketching by the window, half listening to the hum of thunder, when my phone started vibrating. It was Ava. Her voice on the other end was trembling. "Elina, are you awake?" Something in her tone made my heart drop. "Yes, what's wrong?" There was a pause, then a muffled sob. She came back. My ex, she just showed up. She's outside my building, shouting, crying, begging me to open the door. I don't know what to do. "I can't," she broke down before finishing. "I'm coming," I said without thinking. I didn't ask if she wanted me there. I just grabbed my coat and umbrella and ran into the storm. The streets blurred under the rain. By the time I reached her apartment, I was drenched, but none of it mattered. She opened the door before I could knock, eyes red, face pale, hands shaking. She left after I said I'd call the police. Ava said softly, voice raw. But she'd come back. She always does. I stepped inside. The living room was dimly lit, curtains drawn, half a wine glass still on the table. She looked so small in that moment, nothing like the confident woman who once spoke about art and independence. This version of her looked fragile, exhausted, human. I closed the door behind me and said quietly, "You're safe now." "It's okay." She tried to smile but couldn't. I hate that she still gets to do this to me, to walk into my peace like she owns it. I didn't know how to fix her pain, so I didn't try. I just stood near, letting her breathe, letting her cry without shame. Minutes passed in silence, except for the rain tapping softly on the windows. Finally, she whispered, "Why do you care so much, Elina? Why do you keep showing up?" Her voice cracked on the last word. I looked at her, my throat tight, heart beating too fast. "Because," I said slowly, "I know what it feels like to be left behind. And I don't want you to feel that way tonight." Something shifted in her eyes, surprise first, then a softness that felt almost like recognition. She reached out instinctively, and our hands met halfway. Her fingers were cold. I held them gently, not to comfort, but to let her know she wasn't alone. We didn't speak after that. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of everything we couldn't say, everything we were too afraid to admit. I could hear her breathing calm down, slow and steady, matching the rhythm of the rain outside. The chaos faded into something quieter, something that felt almost sacred. She sat beside me on the couch, leaning closer without realizing. I could smell her perfume, faint vanilla and rain. Her head rested lightly on my shoulder, and my entire body went still. For a long time, neither of us moved dot, she whispered, barely audible. "You make it easier to breathe." I wanted to tell her what she made me feel, how her presence had already rewritten the quiet parts of my life, but I didn't. Some truths were too delicate for words. Instead, I whispered, "Then just breathe." She did, slowly, deeply, until her breathing turned into soft, steady rhythm. She'd fallen asleep. I looked down at her, her lashes brushing her cheeks, her lips parted slightly, exhaustion melting into peace. In that moment, everything else disappeared. I felt my chest tighten with something I couldn't stop, something I didn't even want to. That night, she slept, and I fell in love completely, outside. The rain grew heavier, but inside, the world stood still. The only sounds were her breathing and the faint thud of my heart. Time blurred. I didn't know how long I sat there, minutes, hours maybe, just afraid that if I moved, the spell would break. When the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I realized she was still asleep, hands still tangled with mine. I smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She stirred but didn't wake. Part of me wanted to stay, to watch her wake and tell her everything I'd been holding in, how she'd become the calm I never knew I needed. But another part of me knew better. If I stayed, I might ruin the fragile peace that had just begun to exist between us, so I carefully slipped my hand away, stood up, and took one last look at her sleeping form. The storm outside had quieted. The city was washed clean, pale light spilling across her apartment. I whispered softly, more to myself than to her, "You'll be okay, Ava," and then I left, closing the door gently behind me. My footsteps echoing in the silent hallway. By the time I stepped outside, the rain had stopped completely. The air smelled like beginnings, though my heart felt like an ending waiting to happen. As I walked home, the image of her sleeping on my shoulder wouldn't leave me. It followed me through every streetlight, every reflection in a puddle, every heartbeat that hurt just a little more than it should. That night had changed something, not just between us, but inside me. I'd come to protect her, to be her calm after the storm, but somewhere between the rain and her touch, I'd lost the quiet I used to live in. I had fallen, completely, hopelessly, for someone who didn't even know she had already taken my heart. Rain again. It always seemed to come when something in me was about to break. After that night, the one where she fell asleep on my shoulder, everything changed quietly, like the world had turned its back for a second and came back rearranged odd at first. I thought it was just work. Maybe she was busy, maybe she needed space. But days passed, and the blue dots on my messages stayed unread. The calls went unanswered. The silence grew heavy, thick enough to make me question if the warmth I'd felt that night had only existed in my imagination. I told myself not to overthink. But that's what loneliness does best. It fills the silence with noise. One Friday afternoon, when the sky looked like spilled ink, I walked to Bloom's studio. I told myself I just wanted to return a book she had lent me. But deep down, I was looking for her eyes, her voice, anything that could explain this distance. When I stepped inside, I froze. She was there, Ava standing near the large window where the rain painted streaks across the glass. Her hand rested lightly on someone else's arm. A woman, the same woman from the photo in her wallet, the one with the dog. Her ex, they looked close, not in words, but in how their silence touched each other. Ava saw me before I could leave. Our eyes met, and in that second, 1,000 things went unsaid. She opened her mouth, maybe to explain, but I couldn't bear to hear it. I turned and walked away, my reflection scattering in the puddles outside Dot in the voiceover. I whisper, "She looked happy." Or maybe pretending. Either way, I didn't belong there anymore. The rain didn't stop that night. I walked home soaked, letting it hide my tears. My umbrella hung useless by my side half broken again, like the first day I found her wallet. Maybe that was a sign from the start. Everything beautiful I touched eventually bent out of shape. For the next few days, I moved through life like a ghost. My apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of rain against glass. Every corner seemed to hold her laughter, her perfume, her voice saying, "You make the world feel lighter." But now, the world felt heavier than ever. Then, one night, I knocked out. It was late, past midnight. I opened the door, and there she was, Ava. Her eyes were red, her coat damp. She looked like she'd been running. "Elina," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry." I didn't say anything. I just stood there, holding the door like a shield. She showed up at the studio. Ava continued, said she wanted to try again. I was confused, hurt. I thought maybe I owed her closure. But it was a mistake. Her voice cracked. "I can't stop thinking about you." The words hung between us like fragile glass. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to let her in. But something inside me, something tired and bruised, held me back. "You can't keep both of us in your world." "Ava," I said softly. "Choose." She looked at me, tears spilling silently, but no answer came. Just silence, and that silence was louder than any confession. I stepped back and closed the door, gently but firmly. The click echoed like the end of a chapter I hadn't wanted to finish. For a long moment, I just stood there, leaning against the door, my breath shaking. Then I slid down to the floor, my palms pressed against my face as the tears finally came. Beside me lay the wallet, the one I'd found that rainy evening near the cafe. I picked it up, tracing my thumb over the photo tucked inside. Her smile still looked the same, bright, untouched. Dot. Funny how everything began with this little thing. A lost wallet, a found connection, a mistake disguised as fate. Voiceover, Trembling, I thought returning it would close a small loop in someone else's story. I didn't know it would open a wound in mine. The camera would linger here, the dim light, the rain outside, Elina's silhouette on the floor clutching the wallet against her chest. No music, just the faint hum of the city, and the rhythm of her broken breathing, a pause, then a soft line to close the scene. She once told me that every artist leaves a piece of themselves in what they create. I guess I left mine in her. It had been weeks since I last saw her. The silence that followed was different this time, not the aching kind that demanded answers, but the kind that slowly began to teach me how to breathe again. One morning, when the rain finally gave the city a rest, I sat by my window with a cup of cold coffee and an empty page. The pen hovered in my hand for a long time before I began to write. Dear Ava, I never wanted to fall in love with you. I just wanted to return your wallet, but somewhere along the way, you took my heart with it. The words came out slowly, like stepping stones across a river I wasn't sure I could cross. Do you remember that little cafe near Bloom Studio? The one that always played old jazz songs? You said you liked how the music made sadness sound romantic. I didn't understand it then. Now I do. Maybe heartbreak isn't meant to be erased. Maybe it's meant to be rewritten one quiet day at a time. I paused, tracing the shape of her name on the page, Ava. Even now, I felt like a whisper that could undo me. You told me once that you paint emotions, not moments. I think I finally know what you meant. Because when I close my eyes, I still see you, not standing beside your ex, not walking away, but laughing, sunlight in your hair, the world gentle for once. That's the version of you I want to keep. I set the pen down. My hand trembled, but not from pain. It felt like release. The letter grew over days, quiet confessions filling the pages. I wrote about our midnight walks, the way she'd pause at crosswalks just to listen to the city breathe. How she'd describe art as love that doesn't need words. How her silence sometimes felt safer than anyone else's comfort. I wrote until I had nothing left to say. And when I read it back, I realized I didn't need to send it. It wasn't meant for her. It was meant for me. The days that followed were slow but kind. I began painting again. Not for work, for myself. My canvas filled with abstract shapes, colors that felt like emotions I couldn't name, blues that were soft, not sad, golds that looked like hope trying to find its way through the cracks. Sometimes when I painted, I imagined her standing behind me, quietly watching like she used to. But instead of breaking me, that thought made me smile. Maybe some people don't stay to complete your story. Maybe they arrive to help you start it. I started walking again too. The same route I took that first rainy evening when I found her wallet. The same cafe at the corner, its faded sign still flickering like it was undecided about staying open. I stepped inside. The air smelled of coffee and damp wood, familiar, comforting. I sat at the same table by the door, tracing the surface absently with my fingers. The rain outside had begun again, just enough to blur the city lights. Then something caught my eye. Under the edge of the table, a small folded note, slightly torn like it had been there a while. I hesitated before opening it. It read, in neat handwriting, "Some hearts are found to be lost again." I don't know if she wrote it or if it was just one of those strange coincidences the universe likes to send our way. But I smiled, the kind of smile that holds both ache and peace at once. Maybe that was the point. Maybe finding her wallet wasn't about fate or love or loss. Maybe it was just life, two people crossing paths long enough to remind each other what it feels like to feel. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. As I stood to leave, I caught my reflection in the window, tired eyes, but softer now, freer. Voiceover, gentle and calm, over soft piano and rain. I used to think love was about holding on, but maybe it's about learning when to let go, and still be grateful you ever held it at all. Outside, the rain had eased to a drizzle. I opened my umbrella, the same half-broken one from that first night, and smiled. It still worked well enough to keep me dry as I walked away. The city lights flickered across puddles, painting gold streaks on the asphalt. I didn't look back this time, because for the first time in a long while, I didn't need to fade out the sound of soft piano, a heartbeat slowing, and rain washing the past gently away. It had been nearly 6 months since I last heard her voice. The seasons had changed quietly, summer melting into autumn, the air softer, the sky heavier with memory. I had learned to live without waiting for her messages. I had stopped checking my phone late at night, but on a still November evening, as I sat sketching by the window, my phone vibrated once, a single notification lighting up the screen. It was her. Ava. Hi, Elina. I hope you're well. I'm moving to another city next week. A new job, a new start. I just wanted to say thank you for finding my wallet and for finding me. I read it again and again until the words began to blur. There was no bitterness in her message. No apology, no promise. Just quiet gratitude, the kind that comes after everything else has already been said, or perhaps forgiven. For a long time, I just stared at the screen, fingers hovering above the keyboard, searching for something that could fit between goodbye and take care. But there wasn't anything. Not really. So I didn't reply. Instead, I closed my sketchbook, slipped on my coat, and stepped out into the cool night air. The streets shimmered under the lamplight, slick with the memory of earlier rain. My feet moved almost on their own, guided by something older than logic, by nostalgia, perhaps, or unfinished emotion. I found myself standing outside the art gallery we once visited together. The same glass doors, the same faint scent of varnish and dust. The gallery was quiet now, closing soon. Inside, the paintings glowed under soft golden lights, and for a moment I could almost hear her voice beside me, soft, amused, describing the brushstrokes, saying how art was just the soul trying to breathe out loud. I smiled faintly, then I reached into my bag and took out something I hadn't touched in months, her wallet, the one that had started it all. I'd kept it safe, never able to throw it away. It felt lighter now, not just in weight, but in meaning. I opened it carefully. Inside, I placed the folded letter I had never sent, the one filled with all the words she'd never hear. And next to it, a small photograph. The two of us at the park that one sunny afternoon, laughing at nothing, eyes bright. Someone had taken it by accident, a stranger passing by who thought we looked happy. They were right. For that moment, I closed the wallet, ran my thumb over the worn leather, and set it down on a small bench near the entrance, right beside a sculpture. She once had reminded her of Hope. As I turned to leave, I whispered softly, almost to the air itself, maybe some things aren't meant to be kept. Maybe love, like a lost wallet, only finds you to remind you that your heart is still alive. The words echoed in the quiet hall. Outside, the rain began again, light, almost playful this time. I walked slowly through the empty street, the city glowing like a memory that refused to fade. The lights blurred through the raindrops, the world a painting of gold and gray. Voiceover, gentle and trembling. I used to think endings were cruel, that love fading was the same as love dying. But maybe endings are just new beginnings wearing a quieter tone. I reached the corner where we once waited for a taxi together, her hand brushing mine, the air filled with the unspoken. I stopped there for a moment, just breathing. There was no ache now, just a soft hum inside me, the kind of peace that comes when you stop asking why. Somewhere, miles away, Ava was probably packing boxes, maybe glancing at that message she sent, wondering if I ever saw it. Maybe she'd smile the way she used to, that quiet. half-sad smile that once made my world spin, and maybe someday she'd walk into that same gallery again, see the wallet resting there, and understand. Maybe she'd open it, read the letter, see the photo, and know that I never regretted a single thing. Because love, even when it doesn't last, still teaches you how to feel alive. As I continued walking, the rain grew heavier, drumming softly against my umbrella, the same old broken one that had been with me since the night I found her wallet. I didn't fix it. Some things, I realized, don't need to be perfect to protect you. The streetlights shimmered through the storm, and in their reflection on the wet pavement, I saw my own faint smile, soft, broken but free. Voiceover final line, slow, fading, almost a whisper. She walked away with her heart still healing, and I walked away with mine still beating. Fade out. The camera lingers on Elina's back as she disappears into the rain, the city lights turning into distant stars. Soft piano fades into silence, a single note echoing like the last drop of rain on glass.end screen suggestion for video. Some hearts aren't lost, they're just waiting to be found again.
Thank you so much for taking the time to share your thoughts with us. Your feedback is very valuable and will help us improve. May I kindly ask which country you are joining us from?